All right, so I survived my coughing fit, and so I'm back. We already spoke about the properties of opposite of a sum. All right, so here we have an expression. Let's call it our first expression. Now, our first expression is equal to our second expression. Our second expression is equal to our third expression. So if our first is equal to the second is equal to the third, that means that the first expression is actually also equal to the third expression. That is called the transitive property because it transfers over, I guess you could say. Okay, so that is our transitive property. Now, this one is a unique property. It's usually really easy to spot. So if you add two numbers, you'll always, if two real numbers, you'll always get a real number. And it's the only real number that you can get. So you can never get, by adding these two numbers, you can never get a different answer. And that is called the closure property. All right, so now here we have a number that's being added to 0. And when you add 0, you get the same number. So when you add 0 to any number, you always get the same number. So you get, it's called the identity property of addition because you're adding a number and you're getting the same exact identity. All right. So here we have some numbers and I've grouped them differently. So over here, 11 is with 4, they're hanging out together. And over here, 9 is with 11, those guys are hanging out together. So it actually doesn't matter who or what these numbers are associating with, as long as they're the same number, then you get the same answer. So that is called the associative property. Now here we have a negative sign outside parentheses, and if you have the negative of this in here, you actually are negating both things. So it's actually negative 5 plus a negative 4. And that is the property of just opposites. So we're taking the opposite of this and we get it over here. All right. So let's say now I have a number, A. A will always be equal to A. U will always be equal to U. Anything will always be equal to itself. That is kind of obvious, but it's an important property, and it's called the reflexive property. So that is the reflexive property. All right. In an expression, it doesn't matter if I have it in one order or if I have it in another order. If I'm adding, we actually always get the same answer. So here, notice the 7 was in the beginning. Here it's over in the middle. Doesn't matter. You get the same answer. That is called the commutative property of addition. And so just think of it as the number can commute. It can move from one place to one place. It can travel. It doesn't matter. All right. And so now here, it doesn't matter if I have 9 equals x plus 3. It's actually the same thing as x plus 3 is equal to 9. So I could have A is equal to B or B is equal to A. Same exact thing. And that is called the symmetric property. All right, so we have to know those. All right, the next thing that you had to do in this quiz, you can actually do with a calculator now, so you don't really have to worry about that much. And that was quiz 3. All right, moving on to quiz 4. There's some other properties that you have to know how to work with. However, you don't really have to name these properties. So now here we have the distributive property. Just know that if you have a number, there's no sign here. That means that you can multiply. Hold on one second. So here we can just multiply here. This negative 3 by x, we get negative 3x. And negative 3 by negative 5y, and we get plus 15y. So that's just the distribution property. And that's if you don't see a sign between the number and the parentheses. Anything being multiplied by 0, doesn't matter how big it is or how many things there are. Anything being multiplied by 0 is just 0. Here we have the distributive property again, but just to note to yourself, if you have a negative here, all the signs will be changing. So that's why we have negative A plus B and plus C. You have a positive times a negative, you get a negative. We have negative times negative gives you a positive. Negative times negative gives you a positive. So we actually have a positive overall. And here, so we could have used the calculator for those two, but here you cannot. So you actually have to know that negative times a negative gives a positive, but then times another negative gives a negative. Anything times 1 gives you the same thing. Any number times its reciprocal, and we'll talk more about reciprocal in a second, gives you number 1. If you have two fractions, we can multiply the top by the top and the bottom by the bottom. So the numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, and we get the answer. All right, so just to remind you and just to make sure you know, the reciprocal of a number is the number flipped. So right now this is negative 7 over 1. We don't see the over 1, but it is actually over 1. And so the reciprocal is that number flipped. Okay, so here's what made this quiz a little bit more challenging. It's the word problem. So we have the sum of 5 odd numbers is 215. So then we were asked to give an equation to represent that information. So I would name the first number x. And remember that odd numbers are jumping by 2 each time. So if the first number is x, that means the second number would be x plus 2, 2 more than the first one. And then the next one would be 2 more than that one. And then the next one would be 2 more, and then again 2 more. So when you add all 5 of these numbers up, the answer is 215. All right, so then you can just join your like terms. So your like terms. So x plus x plus x plus there are 5 of them. So 5x plus 20 when you add the numbers up gives you 215. Then you just isolate your x and simplify, and you get the answer is x is 39. However, if you're asked to give all 5 numbers, you have to look back at the question. The first number is 39, followed by the next odd number, then the next odd number, then the next. So we're just counting in twos. And even though this question doesn't ask you to check yourself, because you should be used to it by now, when you do add these numbers, you do in fact get a sum of 215. So that's how you know you are correct. All right, moving forward. So here we have another word problem quiz, and it's for cost and income and value. Okay, so here we have Stella has 55 dimes and nickels. So she has 55 coins in all, and they're worth $4.60, which keep in mind, that's actually 460 cents. 460 cents. All right, so we are selecting one variable because, again, we did not yet know how to work with 2. So I chose to work with dimes. You could choose nickels. It actually does not matter which one you choose, but whichever one you choose, you stick to it. All right, so if there are D dimes, that means there are 55 minus D nickels because there are 55 coins in all, and all the rest are nickels. All right, so as far as the worth, remember that each nickel is worth 5 cents and each dime is worth 10 cents. So since there are 55 minus D nickels, then the total worth would be that times 5. And since there are D dimes, then the total worth would be 10 times D. So overall, the worth of the nickels plus the worth of the dimes, you just have to add up both of these expressions and you get the worth of both. Now you also know from the question initially that they are worth, the nickels and the dimes are worth 460 cents. So that is the equation we need in order to figure out how many dimes there are. So from there, we just have to use the distributive property and then simplify the like terms. And we get that there are 37 dimes. Now, how do we figure out how many nickels there are, though? Well, if there are 37 dimes and all the rest are nickels, there were 55 coins in all the rest are nickels, all we have to do is take that 55 total and subtract the number of dimes, and we get the number of nickels, which is 18. All right, so now our second cost value problem. Joseph has twice as many nickels as quarters. If he has $4.90 in nickels, or 490 cents in nickels and quarters, we're going to use these steps in order, there are actually less steps, in order to figure out how many quarters and nickels there are. So I chose to define quarters as Q, and so there are twice as many nickels, so there are actually 2 Q nickels. And now I'm looking at the worth. So again, I didn't walk you through all the steps this time, so I'm going to try to do it now in this video. So here, We have 25 is the worth of 1/4. So 25 times Q gives you the worth of all the quarters. 5 times the number of nickels gives you the worth of all the nickels. And altogether, they're worth 490 cents. So we simplified that and we solved and we got that the number of quarters is 14. Now, even though this question didn't ask you for the number of nickels, it's always good to check yourself. So the nickels, there are twice as many nickels as quarters. So there are, since there are 14 quarters, there will be 28 nickels. All right, so now, as you can see, we're moving on to part 2, which we don't want to do right now. So we're going to scroll past all the topics that are on part 2 of the final until we get back to one of the topics on part 1. So there's still some more at the end. And we're still scrolling. All right, still part 2 of the final, and here we are. So now we're back to content that will be on part 1 of the final. So now we're being asked to write the equation of a line. So here we have the slope, and here we have the y-intercept. And the first one is pretty easy. Just remember that the equation of a line is written in slope-intercept form as y equals m, where m represents slope, mx plus b, where b represents the y-intercept. So y equals m, which is slope, so 7x minus 5. So that's just the y-intercept. Okay, now it gets slightly more challenging, of course, than just putting numbers into an equation. So now we're being asked to find the equation of a line that passes through a point of that with a slope of that. So here we have no y-intercept given, but that's okay because we know the relationship y equals mx plus b. We have an x, we have a y, and we have an m, so we can actually just substitute these values into that equation and solve for b. So y is 4, m is 3, x is 1, so 4 equals 3 plus b, and we can now isolate the b and we get b is equal to 1. So now that we know that b is equal to 1 and m is equal to 3, b is 1, m is 3, we can substitute. We get y equals 3x plus 1. All right, and now the hardest version of this quiz is if you don't have a point, you don't have a slope, you just have 2 points. Well, if we just have 2 points, we can figure out the slope by using this formula for slope. Slope is the difference in y over the difference in x. Otherwise, I can say y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I went ahead and I named the points x1, y1, x2, y2. And then I substituted into this formula. And be very careful not to mix up the values. Let's make sure I didn't. So negative 2 minus 4 gives you y2 minus y1. 2 minus negative 1. Okay, so it looks good. And so we found that our slope is negative 2. Now, I can go ahead and pick either point. I can pick either this point or this point and substitute into y equals mx plus b in order to figure out what my y-intercept is. It doesn't matter which one you choose. I chose the first one. So y, which is 4, equals m, which we found to be negative 2, x, which we have as negative 1. So y equals mx plus b. Now we can solve for b. And when you isolate the b, you get that b is equal to 2. So now we have b is 2 and m is negative 2. Sorry about all the noise. And so we have y equals negative 2x plus 2. All right. So now in this unit, I did not give a lot of quizzes. I actually gave one huge assessment that was kind of like a lot of quizzes put together. And in the next video, I'll start from there.